Joining me now is Patrice Fagnant-MacArthur. She's a Catholic author who wrote a book called The Life and Lessons of Saint Zelie Martin. As you may know, Saint Zelie is the mother of our patroness, Saint Therese of Lisieux. So we wanted to take this time to learn more about a woman who no doubt influenced the little flower. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning.
All right, so in your book, we learn how Saint Therese's parents both strongly desired religious life but ended up marrying each other. So how did that happen?
Yes, Saint Zelie wanted to join the Daughters of Charity of Saint Vincent de Paul, and she presented herself to them. And the Mother Superior turned her down, possibly due to health reasons, but we're not really sure. She really just told her that no, God has other plans for you. So Saint Zelie was, really disappointed. This was something she had wanted for a long time. And St. Louis, he wanted to be part of St. Bernard's monastery in the Swiss Alps. And they told him he needed to learn Latin better. And he really dedicated himself to that for a long time and eventually decided he just couldn't do it due to health reasons and other responsibilities he had. It wasn't going to happen. So they both turned to careers. St. Zelie became a lace maker. St. Louis became a watchmaker, and they were both in Alençon. And we don't know if they knew each other. It's quite possible they did. St. Louis's mother had taken lace making classes with St. Zelie, so it's possible that they had been introduced at some point. But one day in April of 1858, they were crossing a bridge, and St. Zelie's heard in her mind, inner location, telling her that this is the man I prepared for you as she passed St. Louis. And we really don't know what happened after that in terms of their courtship, but 3 months later, they were married on July 12th.
Beautiful. So Saint Therese was the last of 9 children that Saint Zelie gave birth to, but in the book, we learned that she was really nervous about that pregnancy. So why was that, and what was her pregnancy with Saint Therese like?
Yes, she was nervous about the pregnancy. St. Zelie and St. Louis, unfortunately, had already lost 4 children, 3 of them in infancy. One had been lost, I believe it was in 1870, so not that long before she had St. Therese. And so she was very concerned that God would also take this child away from her and not have the opportunity to raise her. And so she was very nervous throughout the pregnancy. But fortunately, the pregnancy went well, even though she was 40 years old, and the birth went well.
And that's amazing. And we have to think about 40 years old back in the 1870s.
Yeah.
That's even older than 40 years old today.
Absolutely.
So it's pretty amazing. One thing that also really surprised me in the book was how St. Zelie struggled with breastfeeding with some of her babies. So I'm curious how you think St. Zelie's intercession can comfort women today who either struggle to produce enough breast milk or just struggle to have their baby latch and feed.
Right. There can be such a pressure to breastfeed that it can be really challenging if you can't for any reason. And so St. Zelie struggled with breastfeeding from her 3rd child on, and she often had to send her children to wet nurses, and she wasn't sure of what type of care they were getting. It was hard to check on the children because they were sometimes were at some distance, and she had had a lot of unfortunate situations. So yes, she can definitely be an intercessor for someone who is struggling with breastfeeding or someone who's simply struggling with the feelings of um, the negative feelings that can sometimes result if you can't breastfeed for whatever reason. She can definitely be a heavenly friend in those circumstances to help.
Yeah. So St. Therese unfortunately lost her mom when she was just 4 years old. So what do you think her older sisters and her dad taught her about her mother?
Yes, she had very limited memories of her mother. She definitely did remember her. She remembered them praying together as a family. She remembered the time leading up to her death when she and her next oldest sister, Celine, were sent to a neighbor's house to try to be cared for, while her mother was suffering. And she remembered when she died going in to kiss her forehead. But her family definitely kept the memory of Saint Zelie alive. Celine said that it was almost as if their mother was still with them, the amount of times that they spoke about her and talked about her influence on the family. And St. Therese had a beautiful quote where she said that God gave me a mother and father more worthy of heaven than of earth. So she definitely still held her mother in very high esteem, even though she had a very limited amount of time with her in this world.
Mm. And growing up, I mean, she didn't know they were going to become canonized saints, but
Right.
I mean, obviously she knew that they were very special.
Yeah.
And then her dad never remarried after St. Zelie
No.
died. So you kind of already spoke to it, but what do you think it was like growing up in her home? I mean, to have a dad who's a saint.
Right. And as you mentioned, they didn't know that growing up. These were their parents. They realized they were holy, they were devout, they practiced their faith. Saint Zelie often went to morning mass before she would start her workday, and her devotion to her family life. So, but they were their parents. They cared for them. They had their ups and downs throughout life. So it was holiness in the everyday, which I think we can all hope to aspire to.
Yeah. And what's one of your favorite ways that you've come to love Jesus more through learning about St. Zelie and St. Louis Martin?
I think the fact that they were so relatable. I think people today, even though they lived, in the 1800s, I think people today can look at this couple and see role models that they can emulate. They were working parents. They had to balance caring for their children and caring for their own parents. They dealt with economic struggles at times and trying to manage all those aspects of life that we can still relate to today. So I think they show us how to serve and love Jesus in the midst of family life, which is such an important way to be a role model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also loved that they had help around the house. They had, I think, servants perhaps, and people who helped them clean. So they weren't people who were trying to just do it all and self-reliant. And they
Yeah.
really welcomed help in their home.
Yes, yes. And I think that is an important point because so often today we try to do it all our own, and we try to reject that idea like, oh, I don't need any help. I can do it. I can do everything myself. Yeah. And so that's an important point to make too, that they definitely had help in the midst of their busy lives.
Yeah. All right. Well, Patrice, if people want to get your book, they can get The Life and Lessons of St. Zelie Martin at Amazon.com, or they can go to your website, pfmacarthur.com. And I encourage everyone to check it out, especially as we celebrate the feast day of St. Therese of Lisieux, our patroness here at Catholic TV.